Welcome everyone. In this video we'll be showing you how to install the legendary gas performance monoballs. The gas performance monoballs are designed to be a precision fit into your BMW control arms. They can be installed by anyone using just basic tools and the items included in the monoball kit, if you carefully follow the instructions in this video. The monoball is a solid ball joint that replaces the spongy rubber mounted bushing in your front control arm. Here you can see 4 different styles of rubber bushings found in BMW vehicles. In this video we'll be showing you the installation of 2 of our most popular monoball models. The standard E90 version, which uses a Lemforder control arm, and the E90 M3 version, which uses a TRW control arm. To perform your monoball installation, you're going to need the following tools: a cordless drill, a dust mask, safety glasses, shop towels, and some sort of solvent such as brake clean. You will also need a universal bushing removal tool with the proper size bushing sleeves to fit your BMW control arms, or the German Auto Solutions control arm bushing tool, which is designed specifically for BMW control arms. The German Auto Solutions BMW bushing tool is available for purchase or rent on the German Auto Solutions website at germanautosolutions.com. Whichever tool you choose, it'll need a receiver cup or sleeve that has an opening slightly larger than the bushing diameter, and a pushing cup or sleeve with a diameter that is slightly smaller than the diameter of the bushing being removed. The receiver cup or sleeve will also need a pocket deep enough to accept the entire length of the control arm bushing, and the pusher cup will need a pocket deep enough to accept the side spacers on the gas performance monoballs, as you can see in the image shown. The pusher cup or sleeve must be able to sit flush against the monoball's aluminum housing. It must not be able to contact or apply any pressure against the monoball side spacers. So here's what's included in your monoball kit. You have your 2 monoball assemblies, your 4 stainless steel side spacers that may or may not have already been installed, 2 tubes of Loctite sleeve locking compound, a sanding flap wheel to be used in a cordless drill, a Scotch-Brite pad, a small vial of Loctite primer activator, and a latex glove. Okay, it's finally time to get started with the actual procedure. We're going to start with removing the stock bushings from the control arms, and we're going to start by using the German Auto Solutions BMW control arm bushing tool. We're going to show you first using the tool. That can be either, in this case, it's mounted, the control arm is mounted in a vise, or you could actually just be laying on the bench. I mean, it works just as well either way. So the first we need to identify the parts. We've got the receiver cup, we've got the high strength threaded rod, we got the pushing piston, and we've got our various ring inserts that accommodate the different bushing sizes. We've got our thrust bearing components and our high nut here. We've also got a hose clamp, which I'll explain its purpose a little bit later. Okay, first we're going to verify that we have the proper steel ring inserts. Make sure I've chosen the middle size one, which I know is right for the E90 series. So the ring that just fits over the bushing, and then the piston ring that fits just inside of it. So we'll go ahead and install the receiver ring in. And then we've got our threaded rod, double nut, and just the standard washer. It isn't one of the precision washers. Make sure you don't put one of the precision ground washers in this location. So we put our cup in place, put a threaded rod through. So we install our piston steel ring. And there's 2 precision washers and a needle bearing that are included in the kit. If one of them is thinner than the other, then the thinner washer goes on first. then the needle bearing, then the thick washer, and then the nut. Special note, the threaded rod is pre-lubed with a special red moly grease. Depending on your bushing style, sometimes there's a lot of load put on this tool, and the grease needs to be there, so be careful what you do. Don't set the threaded rod down on a dirty bench or on the ground or anything where it can pick up any dust or dirt or abrasive material. So now we'll go ahead and start pushing this through. You'll need two 19mm wrenches or combination of wrench and socket. Sometimes with used control arms, the center of the bushing hole will have moved off center because of its constant load on it. The rubber will actually have taken a set in one direction, and when you get the piston up close to the bushing, it may not line up perfectly concentric. So if that is the case, you can just slide the hose clamp over, and you would go ahead and tighten that down, and that will force the two pieces concentric to each other, and then you just push the piston right on through both the hose clamp and the control arm. So let's go ahead and finish pushing it through. And there we go. Now I'm going to show you quickly how to do the same procedure on a hydraulic press using the German Auto Solutions control arm bushing tool. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll just go through it quickly. Obviously we're going to use the same receiver cup with the steel insert ring, and we'll position our piston and center everything nicely. The only thing you're not using here obviously is the threaded rod and the bearings. And we'll start pressing it out. Make sure our piston tool is centered. Okay, once my piston ring is sitting flush with the control arm, to back off the hydraulic pressure for a bit and recenter to make sure we're not going to accidentally take any material off the inside of the control arm bore with the piston tool pressing through. And there we go. Now that the stock bushings have been removed, I'd like to say a few words about why the following procedure is necessary. Our goal with the gas performance monoballs is to have a very precise fit to the control arm bores. The problem is the control arm bores have both size variations and roundness variations. Our monoballs are sized to properly fit the loose end of those size variations. The goal of the following procedure is to precisely match the control arm bore size to the size of the monoball housings. This often involves removing a tiny amount of material from the inside of the control arm bores. Don't worry, we are only talking about 1 to 2 1/1007" of material. I would also like to mention that the following procedure is being performed on two control arms that are on the small side of the scale. There is always a chance that your control arms may be on the larger side of the scale and may require very little sanding. It's always a good idea to test fit your monoballs into your control arms before you start. Use the test fitting procedure shown in this video to test fit your monoballs before you begin sanding. The first thing we're going to do to prep our control arms is to use some solvent and a shop rag to remove the oily residue on the inside of the control arm bore. We want to make sure that the bores are nice and clean before we start using our sanding wheel to prep the ID of the control arm. We'll go ahead and do the other control arm as well. Okay, before we start using our sanding wheel to size the control arm bores, I'd like to point out a few details of the control arm. Every control arm has a chamfered side and a non-chamfered side. You can see the chamfered side in the image above. We always want to install our monoballs from the chamfered side of the control arm. You will typically find that the chamfered end of the control arm is a little larger in diameter than the non-chamfered end. This means that you will typically have to sand the non-chamfered end a little bit more than the chamfered end to make the control arm bores straight. I'd also like to point out, in nearly every control arm that I've worked on, the bore has been a little tighter in the direction shown in the image. You will typically have to sand the area shown in red approximately twice as much as the rest of the control arm bore. Now we can go ahead and use our sanding wheel to start sizing our control arm bores. We're going to be generating some aluminum dust, so don't forget to wear your eye protection and a dust mask. I also recommend wearing gloves to protect your hands from the sanding wheel. Okay, let's go ahead and install our sanding wheel into our cordless drill. Now we're going to go ahead and start sizing our control arm bore. You're going to want to grasp the control arm firmly close to the bore and rest the other end on your hip or your leg. Position the sanding wheel in the center of the bore and always try to keep it parallel to the control arm bore while you're sanding. We're going to make slow circular passes around the inside of the control arm bore using firm pressure of the sanding wheel up against the control arm. Now I'm going to go ahead and work just the areas that were shown in red in the previous image. I'll work those areas in short arcs, moving the sanding wheel in and out of the control arm bore to make sure I get all areas. I'll move back and forth between the left and the right sides of the bore. Now I'm going to flip the control arm over so I can work the same areas entering the sanding wheel from the opposite side of the control arm. Now I'll go ahead and make some more circular passes around the entire bore before we try test fitting our monoball housings. We're going to try our first test fitting. So you're going to be very careful. You're just going to kind of rock this back and forth. You can tell by which way it rocks. It's rocking like this rather than like this, so we're still a little bit tight on the sides, but it is starting to want to just go in. You want to be very, very careful during these times when you feel like you're getting close and it's snug, that you don't try to keep pushing. You're putting heat into the bore of the control arm while you're sanding it, and your monoball is still at room temperature, and you're going to start sliding this in, and it's going to start cooling down the control arm bore, and it's going to seize itself right onto the monoball and get it stuck, and then you're going to have to carefully tap it out or press it out to avoid damaging it. So I can go in about a quarter of the way from the side with the chamfer on it, and it is still rocking in this direction, which means I'm still tight here and here. And from the other direction, it really doesn't want to start at all. And it also is rocking in this direction. So I need to work these areas here a little bit more, and especially the entire tire bore on the non-chamfered side. And this is really common for the 11-foot arms. I always find this side to be tighter than the side with the chamfer. So we're going to go ahead and take out a little bit more material. And we'll wipe the towel through there. And we'll retest for size. So it's wanting to go in, so I'm very careful not to push it all the way in, because I've been down that road many times. It's also wanting to go in this way. Again, not quite as far, still a little tight. So we're going to go ahead and work those tight areas just a little bit more. So we'll give it another try. And it's acting like it's about a perfect fit, but it's going to shrink. Yep, see, I'm getting almost all the way in. And it's starting to tighten up on me. When you remove it, after you've been going in part way, look for shiny areas inside the control arm. The shiny areas are the tight spots. So concentrate your sanding efforts on the shiny areas. Again, should never be pushing much pressure. Just be lightly pushing and rocking. Okay, that goes all the way in. Just a nice snug fit. That is going to tighten up. So we want to make sure that we don't leave that in there too long. I can feel to the touch that this is warmer than this. So we're going to set this arm aside while we work on the other arm, give it a chance to come back to room temperature. If you'd like, you can also dip these in room temperature lukewarm water if you don't want to wait. But you absolutely want to make sure that it's a nice slip, snug fit with both the control arm and the monoball at room temperature. So now we're going to go ahead and work with the TRW arm. And this is actually a really poor example, Normally on TRW arms, when you press them out, see all the gouging on that bushing? Normally there's that much gouging inside the control arm bore. Almost always. And it varies from very light, which this is, to sometimes just really, really nasty. So what I was hoping to show you was a nasty one and how we correct for that before we start sanding. But you need to go ahead and, the spots are obvious. Hopefully you can see it on camera. You want to go ahead with a half round file And you want to go over those spots, keeping as flat to the control arm bore as you can. And just do kind of 30 to 45 degree cross patterns. And anywhere the file feels like it's kind of hanging up, that's going to be a high spot. We're going to go ahead and concentrate on those spots. Going to keep rotating the arm around. Yeah, this is literally probably the nicest TRW control arm bore I've ever seen after removing the control arm bushing. You could almost get away with this one with not doing any filing, but I definitely wanted to show you the procedure. So if yours looks really bad, has a lot of gouging in it, this may actually take a little while. You want to definitely take your time. What I'll kind of do to check is I'll take a utility knife blade and I will kind of run it flat in there, kind of scrape it around the perimeter and see if I can see where if it hangs up anywhere. And I'm not feeling it hang up. So this one's probably ready to go ahead and sand. And again, I just want to caution you that you're probably not going to have the same experience on your controller. This is kind of an oddball. So we're going to go ahead first and just go around a couple revolutions with the flap wheel and then do our first test fitting. I'm not going to show the entire procedure again. It's exactly the same as what we just did on the lem folder arm. You just need a sand and then test fit, and then sand and then test fit. Then let everything return to room temperature and test fit again. I'm sorry, but I somehow lost the video clip of the final test fitting once everything had returned to room temperature. As is typical, I had to do a tiny amount of additional sanding because the fitment had tightened up a tiny bit. Once you have your sizing perfect with all the components at room temperature, use the provided Scotch-Brite pad around the inside of the control arm bore to leave a nice fine surface finish. Okay, now that we've verified our fit with the monoball and control arms at room temperature, we can go ahead and do the first step in the install process. So we've got our little bottle of primer activator, we've got our applicator pad, both included in the kit. Got latex gloves. I'm gonna go, well, before I do that, there is a little restrictor in the top of the primer activator. It takes kind of forever to get the activator out through this little hole, so you can go ahead and pop that out. Be really careful you don't spill it. Put the cap back on just for a second while I put the glove on. So we're going to be applying this to both the inside circumference of the control arm bore and the outside surface of the monoball. We're going to go ahead and completely wet the little gauze pad. And we're going to go inside the control arm and we're just going to wipe that around the inside circumference. We're going to go ahead and wet it again. I'm going to do the other control arm. And actually it's still quite wet, so I'm not going to apply any more to the gauze pad for right now. I'm going to go ahead now and coat the outside of the first monoball. And I'll lightly wet it again. There's considerably more primer activator in there than you need to do the job. And we are going to go ahead and coat the outside of the other monoball. Now we're going to put our plug back in, put our top back in so it doesn't spill or evaporate. And now we need to let those sit so the solvents can evaporate off for at least 15 minutes. Okay, we're ready to go ahead and apply our Loctite and install the monoball. So we're just going to break off the end of the Loctite tube, and it's going to go ahead and apply that to the circumference of the control arm bore. We're going to spread that around the inside of the bore, and then I'm going to set it down with the chamfered side facing down. We want any movement of the Loctite to move in the direction that we're going to be installing the monoball from. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply Loctite to the outside of the monoball housing. And we're going to spread that around. You want to thoroughly coat, but you don't want it dripping off. With a perfect fit that you have created, it doesn't need much. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the finger of my glove so I don't get that all over my nice new monoballs. And we'll reposition the camera a second. Okay, as you can see, got our German Auto Solutions tool secured in a vise. I'm locking it down on the double nut. You could do this laying down flat on a bench. You could do it a number of different ways. This is just going to be the easiest for us to video. So if you're really anal like me, I always take one of the bolt holes and I line it up with the center line. Hopefully you can see that, of the control arm, just so they're both symmetrical. Makes absolutely no difference. It's purely cosmetic. It's under your car. It's just me being stupidly anal. Also, we need to make sure that we're installing this towards the chamfered end first. So we'll set that down on our tool. We'll slide our piston down. We'll install our needle bearing components. And the nut. And you can see that's actually going in with just being finger tight on the nut. And that'll vary depending on what your particular fit is. To being like that, or just requiring a little bit of tension with your wrench. But that is a perfect fit. Go ahead and remove my piston bearing. Go ahead and remove the control arm. Now we want to take our shop towel and wipe out any Loctite that has been pushed through. It doesn't hurt anything. Again, it's just cosmetic. And then we want to immediately install our side plates. Go ahead and spin those down. Not only do the side plates make sure you've completely drawn the monoball all the way in, but they also supply significant amount of lateral clamping pressure between the side plates and the Loctite. These are not going to move. So go ahead and snug those up, skipping every other screw, and keep going around. Until they're all tight. I will post the torque spec for these on the video screen. I have done so many of these. I can get these just about perfect by feel. Alright, there we go. One installed gas monoball. Now we'll give you just a quick view of the procedure on the hydraulic press. Okay, I've already applied my Loctite in the same manner that was just previously shown. Go ahead and set control arm in place with the chamfer side up. Set my monoball down. And try to get everything centered best you can initially. We can make corrections as we go if needed. So I'm going to move this just a little bit. Because everything has been sized very accurately, there isn't going to be much pressure here, so it doesn't matter if things aren't perfectly aligned. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, and just as you get close to bottoming out, double check the centering of your receiver. The monoball does slightly protrude through the bottom side, so you don't want that catching on the lip of the receiver cup. It'll just squash it a little bit. Again, won't hurt function, but it'll just be cosmetic. So there you go. Again, I'm going to wipe off the excess Loctite. And we'll go ahead and install the side plate as we previously just did. You're now ready to reinstall your control arms and start to enjoy all the benefits of your gas performance monoballs. Thank you for watching.